Enjoying yourself for a change?
From the outset, venturing into the Mesoamerican and Latin American inspired land of Tural might lead you to believe that Final Fantasy XIV's latest expansion is a summer vacation for a band of heroes that has saved entire realms from calamity. However, I can assure you that whatever you thought Dawntrail was, that's exactly what it's not. It's the start of a new era, and the growing pains of that transition are apparent at times. But in its biggest moments, Dawntrail proves once again why the critically acclaimed MMORPG is the standard bearer for this iconic series. Dawntrail explores culture, family, and legacy in ways Final Fantasy XIV hasn't in the past, and before long, it begins to ask questions about the lengths we'll go to preserve the things that we hold dearest. That will sound familiar to anyone who has stuck around all these years, but Dawntrail takes its own angles on these themes as to not retread well-worn territory. It offers new perspectives that at times hit just as hard as anything in the MMO's 14-year history. The main scenario quest takes you in unpredictable directions, blending its deep real-world influences with sci-fi to touch on the cyberpunk genre, then manages to weave in the Final Fantasies of yore and have it all still make sense. It takes some work to get there though, and I appreciate the groundwork Dawntrail lays in its first half, painting a vivid picture of Tural's cultures. From the architecture of the new hub city of Tural to the environments, cuisine, and customs of its early zones, Dawntrail wears its influences on its sleeve, naturally fitting those societies and the peoples who embody them into an already rich fantasy world. As fascinating as the cultural exploration is, there's a noticeable lack of momentum to the first half of the story, which isn't surprising given that it is establishing a whole new arc. You travel across the lands of Tural alongside the new character named Wukalamat, a naive but always optimistic Hrothgar who has a heart of gold.
I'd look out over the whole city, and whatever worries I had would seem so small.
She's in the middle of an anime-like tournament arc against her siblings in hopes of becoming the new ruler of Tural. This leads you to gain an intimate connection with the region's people and bridge gaps between the seemingly disparate societies of each zone. It's structured so that you go through similar motions for very long stretches, and parts of the story itself are written in a way that's uncharacteristically surface level for Final Fantasy XIV. Aside from learning about the new regions, unraveling the relationships between the siblings was one of the highlights in the early goings, since it does eventually pay off. Initially, I was quite surprised that Wukalamat is essentially the main character of Dawntrail. However, she is the link that connects you to this new region, and having her as your lens while you, being the mentor in her traveling band, provides the critical context. I like her as a character since she has the heart to carry Dawntrail's themes, but she isn't really given the depth needed to be a leading protagonist. So when she extols the virtues of peace without demonstrating an understanding of the nuances that come with that, it tends to ring hollow.
I'm Gulul Jaja's daughter, and Tuliholal's next Dawn servant.
But with a tinge of shonen-style power of friendship energy, Dawntrail has its heart in the right place. And although it sometimes seems superficial, it's nice to have a story that just outright says that embracing our differences and engaging in a genuine cultural exchange would make the world a better place, which Wukalamat does represent admirably.
This is delicious! The brook is so tender it melts in your mouth, and the way the Najuli rounds out these spices is sublime.
There were a few times where I questioned what Dawntrail was really building towards. However, some well-designed dungeons, engaging boss fights with fresh battle mechanics, and hype moments in story-based solo instances kept me engaged and invested. And if anything, I was just happy to be along for the ride. That's also because I knew I would inevitably hit a turning point in Dawntrail, like all Final Fantasy XIV expansions tend to have. And when I got there, it left me floored with revelations that ripple throughout the MMO's long history.
A golden light. Could it be?
The switch flips as Dawntrail ushers you into its version of the old-timey American West. Hearing a Texan accent in Final Fantasy XIV for the first time gave me whiplash like any plot twist, but this area effortlessly blends into the rest of the expansion's personality.
I don't give a shit about your evidence, you lying scum.
And what it has up its sleeve deeper in creates a stark contrast that is both conceptually and aesthetically superb. The high-tech sci-fi aspect of this expansion was pretty well known in the lead up to release, but it's the reasons for bringing you to the futuristic city of Solution 9 that made for quintessential Final Fantasy XIV storytelling. It goes for some wild swings, and the second half contains truly stunning moments I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Vanish!
Having been so invested for all these years and carrying many of my favorite story moments into my own life, I can't always expect it to keep reaching those highs. Yet, Dawntrail does it again. Perhaps not as consistently or elegantly, but it has left a significant impact nonetheless. It explores what makes family important, asks why we harbor such resentment for those different from us, and shows what's possible when we work together. But more effectively, it also builds on the questions posed in Shadowbringers and Endwalker about how we handle loss, mortality, and the inevitable passage of time sweeping away the things we hold dear, and the uncomfortable truth that we ascribe value to life because it will end.
Above all else, I wish that they had lived.
Part of me feels like Dawntrail conjoins two very different halves, and I often imagine the depth to which it could have explored its larger themes had it dedicated more time to one or the other. But with just enough connective tissue for its hard-hitting moments to land, it's able to make the same kind of impact that previous expansions have, and for its own reasons. The absolute onslaught of its last few dungeons also had me on the edge of my seat, frantically dodging AoEs and executing my attack rotation. The creative battle mechanics that even surprised me as a longtime Savage Raider left me grinning as I took those Vuln stacks like a champ. And to have fought almost all those battles alongside my favorite characters through the duty support system let these gameplay moments also shine as peaks in its storytelling. The emotional core that always ushers Final Fantasy XIV's best moments together is found in its music. Masayoshi Soken alongside the sound team has broken new ground here in Dawntrail. The Spanish and Latin American influences have been effortlessly woven into the songs that fill the new zones with wonder and excitement. The wistful riffs of the folksy Western guitars stand out as catchy tunes that set an unmistakable mood. Then you have synth-infused metal and trance tracks for pivotal battles that pack a punch unlike anything else in Dawntrail's eclectic soundtrack. And yes, there are some sweet lo-fi beats to chill or study to, and some jazzy swing for the hub city of Tural. Regardless of style, Soken and company create incredible music that bends, fuses, and elevates genres while consistently incorporating the classic musical themes. Just another common W for Final Fantasy XIV. Story may be at the forefront of Dawntrail's launch, but with the new expansion also comes new jobs, Pictomancer and Viper. After leveling Pictomancer and learning its attack rotation full of adorable painting abilities turned destructive, it's become one of my all-time favorites. It's so cute, so unserious, and so much damn fun to play with. It finds a middle ground between its magic DPS counterparts Black Mage and Summoner, not so complex that you'll struggle to learn, but not so simple that you'll mindlessly cycle through your rotation. It's satisfying when you line up all the cooldowns and casts while bouncing between the different spells you're expected to execute. Viper, on the other hand, isn't quite as exciting as I'd hoped. Maybe it's because I've played melee DPS for most of my time in Final Fantasy XIV and have stuck with Ninja through every raid tier, but in contrast to Pictomancer, it lacks the rewarding build-up and burst window or a distinct personality to make it stand out within a crowded field of DPS jobs. It'll get some reworks, and although it's impossible to say how that might change things, there is certainly potential for it to grow into a better job. Dawntrail has some growing pains and notable lulls as it establishes a new era for Final Fantasy XIV, but the compelling cultures of Tural are strong enough to carry you to its greater moments. It's also nice to see real-world influences near and dear to me represented so well. Once the main story flips the switch and shows you what it's really about, it hits the kinds of peaks we've seen from the MMO time and time again. Dawntrail had me stunned by spectacular combat encounters, but more importantly, it left me floored with a unique sense of self-reflection. It doesn't forget that this is a Final Fantasy story, and the way it ties its past, present, and future makes for incredible moments that continue to define the series. Dawntrail is a worthy extension of Final Fantasy XIV, and it leaves a world of fascinating possibilities for what's next.
After everything that's happened, and imagining what could happen, are you still willing to walk this path with me?
It's been a huge year for RPGs, so check out my reviews of Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and for everything else, stick with IGN.
Behold the scene of our next great adventure.